Hello, this is Heather Gates, and I welcome you to the Stand in the And podcast, where we have honest conversations about the messy complexity of the human experience, where we get stuck, and how we find forward, in the and of it all where many things are true at once. This podcast is designed especially for those of us who want to make things more beautiful and better for everyone, and sometimes need reminding that we are human too. I'm so glad you're here. Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. I'm glad to have you with us today. Thank you for the curiosity that brought you here to the table, where I'm joined by a fellow systems and process enthusiast.
Yay.
And podcast pro, it turns out. Leah Ferguson, who's based here also, just like me in Western North Carolina. Leah, thanks for coming down to hang out in Henderson County today.
Thank you so much, Heather. I'm really happy to be here.
I'm so happy to have you. I know this is going to be fun. Before we get started, I would love for you to introduce yourself in whatever way feels meaningful to you today.
Thank you so much. Wow. So for the purposes of this podcast today, I'm Leah Ferguson. I have a doctorate in public health, and I'm an enthusiast about a lot of different topics. I have enthusiasms, and I'm a nerd generalist. So we're going to be talking a lot about things that I do deep dives into. But I think, when we met, Heather, I was doing the Community Transformation Project, which feels like a really big title when I was like, I'm lead of the Community Transformation
CTG.
Project. Yes, exactly. Transforming communities. But I actually am very interested in transformation in all kinds of ways, and in community transformation towards thriving, towards better health.
Yep.
I'm a nonprofit executive because that's the platform that I have to use to do that. But spend a lot of time doing national work, network building, network weaving, community organizing. All of those things are things I really love and have had the privilege and honor to do.
I'm obsessed with the words nerd generalist. And may need to update my business card. We're not going to take this rabbit hole path, but I will say, just as somebody who also, I introduced you to me as I thought about our shared connectivity as a systems process person. So I think even coming up through public health, where a lot of times people are focused on a condition or a particular problem they're trying to solve. But I too am in this sort of generalist, how does it all work? In service to, transformation. It's not change. I tell people, it's not about change. Change means different. We've all had a bad haircut and painted our house a weird color. That's change. We're talking about improvement. We're talking about transforming in service to better. We talk here about flourishing, right? That all of this is in service to human flourishing. So yeah, community transformation, it's been some time ago. So I'm happy that our paths have crossed, that you are still in the region, and that you're here. As we get started, we've been doing, I think we'll stick with it until we get bored of it, is the kind of 2-word check-in that I call the and stand on how you're showing up today. How are you today as you sit with me here?
I am optimistic and anxious. I think I'm really riding both of those things. I feel a turning, when people talk about when you're kind of sensing into the world and you get up every day. And I feel actually like there's a lot of like potential optimism happening, even in a world that feels like it is on fire and not in a good way.
Yeah. So you feel some turning in the external, so more kind of sensing into the external environment.
I think so. But partly it's because I think I've moved from national work into hyper-local work. And I'm just totally inspired by the people that I meet every day, the nuance that they bring to the work and to serious challenges, and how they're leaning into community. I got the chance to listen to women who were in an institutional setting, working to make their lives better as part of a qualitative research project, and they just reminded me of
Mm,
resilience, of the things that we're going to talk about today,
yeah.
of of flailing and flying.
I Yeah, just the comment you made about working locally resonates. I think a lot of times when we see right, working locally, I experience over and over and over connection and cohesion and collaboration in a way that is inspiring to me too. Oh, and stand for me. I'm feeling very reflecty.
Mm. I like that word.
I was going to say pondery, but that's not it. I'm feeling reflecty. I think it's a seasonal pattern for me, especially once we get to about November.
Mhm,
To me, the year is done.
mhm,
And then there's this middle part that's just the holidays. But I get real like, how are things going? What is nourishing? What is heavy? What needs to shift? What needs to fall away? So I'm feeling some fall energy
mhm.
um, in me, and I'm really curious about this conversation. I love conversation with you. You know this. It feels like a fun brain playground when we get to share space. So I'm just excited to see where it goes. So with that, I think we'll get right into it. You gave us a little teaser
Mhm.
about flailing and flying, and I wonder if the place to start is in the story that you told me at lunch last time. Does
Yeah,
that feel like the entry?
sure.
Because I've been thinking more about it. I'm like,
Mhm.
here's where that makes sense to me, and here's
Oh, I love
where
it.
because that's what's I think fun about our
Mhm,
conversations is it's not always here's how exactly we see things the same way.
mhm.
It's a very respectful interrogation of things. So
Yeah,
let's start there.
absolutely. So, I guess I'll start a little bit with where the story came to me, how it came to me. I, I'm love deep dives and researching, and I was thinking a lot about leadership actually. And I was introduced to a framework by a gentleman named David Snowden. And Snowden is a researcher and academic. He's at MIT in their business school. And he produced something called the Cynefin framework, which is about how leadership needs to adapt to the conditions
Hmm.
that you approach. So, those of us who read books, like Servant Leadership and other leadership books, there's this idea that there's a kind of right way to lead. And there is perhaps, but there's also what's required of us, especially those who are trying to meet moments and meet communities where they're at, and is to be adaptive. And so that led me to really think a lot about adaptive capacity in leadership and how that shows up in the work that I do, the way that I work, and what I'm trying to um, kind of build in community or assess in community.
Hmm.
Usually, that's what I'm really looking at: is where is the adaptive capacity in community, and how do we build from there? And so I came upon a lecture that he was giving, and he told this story, and then I spent a lot of time thinking about it. And my partner is a biology teacher, reads a lot of books on biology, and this is the concept comes from evolutionary biology. I am not an evolutionary
So
biologist.
if you're
Caveat,
listening,
caveat,
all
caveat.
right.
You can write Heather if I
If you have
totally.
complaints about Leah, feel free to send them to connect@standintheand.com.
Yeah, if I butchered this, but so the story goes that what we know about dinosaurs is that they um, evolved into birds. And when I first heard the story, I thought, of course, T Rex. That was the dinosaur that
Yeah,
popped into my head.
same. I was
Like,
like, that feels like a stretch.
that's a big bird,
Yeah.
right? Just not, But actually, there were lots, of course, dinosaurs, and some of them were smaller, and they would move up, maybe to avoid things like the climate disaster that killed a lot of dinosaurs, or they were moving away to avoid predators, but they were moving upwards into higher altitudes, into trees and things like that. And they developed feathers. And what Snowden and others have said that feathers were not an evolutionary result of flight. They actually evolved for warmth. So you're up here, you're up in the mountains or in the tops of trees, and what else can happen to you? Well, you can fall. And so here's where there's a little bit of a black box space that I like to put poetry in. So one of my ands is science and poetry.
Love it.
I love those things together. And
Yep.
so here, get poetic with me, even if you're a
The story of
scientist.
science and poetry together that gives us something to start from.
That's right. And so then it becomes a great working metaphor for what we're going to be talking about in terms of resilience and adaptation. So these dinosaurs have got their feathers, and they, of course, are on higher altitudes and they fall. Well, if you're going to fall, you better flail, because if you don't flail, you hit the ground pretty hard and you don't get to live another day. So the ones that got to live another day, um, they fluff up and they catch some wind and they make themselves a little parachute out of their bodies. And I like to think that a couple of them started to find joy in that falling and flailing.
Mm.
And when they found that joy, they moved their bodies, they experimented, they innovated, and that evolves over time into flying, right? That in and of itself is incredible. But the thing that's even more incredible about it is that because those dinosaurs learned to fly, they used their feathers, they exapted their feathers for flight. It created the capacity for life all over the planet because their little poops were
Nice.
full of all kinds of organic material, and they moved that across the planet, right? So you have this fundamental like moment in kind of evolution that really creates the space for us.
So we need to flail.
We need to flail. And also be high enough, right? Have enough risk in our lives to fall.
Yeah, play that out another step for us. So when you think about this metaphor, how does it serve you in your work and your thinking? What is it shaping for you?
I think, partly it's around creating safe enough to fail spaces.
Yeah.
So I tend to think of myself often like I'm the mother bird that kicks the kids out of the nest. I'm like, well, you better flail. No, and that, I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen it, but not everyone makes it,
Mhm.
right? Not all the birds make it. But you do want safe enough to fail opportunities for community. Um, and that, yeah, and that experience, the sort of experience of flailing is so uncomfortable.
Mm.
Like the discomfort of that, right? Especially in public. Um, and that and that you're going to flail and the gracelessness of it. And if you do, and if you don't hit the ground super hard and you do actually live another day and shake yourself off, it's not like you're like, you know, strutting across.
No.
You do that sad little climb back up to wherever.
Actually, I might have to lay for a minute.
Exactly.
Actually, failure for me, I have to soak it in. Right? It's like
Starfish.
face down in the arena, noticing the dirt, spitting it out. But I have to honor that part, I think.
Mhm.
Right? When I was thinking about this is because sometimes it does feel like the nudge from external is bounce.
Mhm.
I'm like, I got to take it in for a
Mhm.
second, wrap it in a little self-compassion. And it's probably from that place that I have to be reminded of what the values I'm holding are
Mhm.
that got me to wherever I fell from in the first place.
Yeah.
Right. And that's how I think that's, at least for me, where then the stand back up and the climb and crawl. Because from the bottom,
Yeah, I love that.
I have to also give myself permission to never climb again.
Mm.
There's something liberating to me about remembering that for me, I'm not kind of accidentally flailing to, but it's not, it's some other fancy word that you use.
Oh, exact.
Right. But uniquely for us, I think, as a species, is choice.
Yeah.
So I'm always reminding myself, you're at choice. You stay right there on the ground if you want to. And then it lets me,
Yeah.
kind of remember and of the agency to crawl again. So values for me, when I think about the stuckness, even in the and of
Mhm.
on the other side of flail, right? On the
Mhm.
fail side of it, and the stuckness that comes from that, remembering the values that I'm standing in, which right. All of this separate from perfectionism.
Mhm.
That's not what any of this conversation is about. The values that got me there, that remind me when I have to look at myself in the mirror, like, this is why you do this, and you showed up in your values as you were falling.
Mhm.
Um, Self-compassion about the fall. And then the third one I'd say is, yeah, permission, reminder, you're at choice. Never
S
climb again. And then I always climb again, but I have to remember.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's right, because you get knocked out of your senses a little bit,
Yeah.
in life. And, I also think that the instinct is often to protect people from the flail.
Mm,
And when you do that, you steal their learning because we have to learn from the experience. So, what is transformation? But learning through the pain of what it
mm,
means to exist, right? And so the instinct to protect the people that we care about or commute, whatever it is, from the discomfort because we don't like it, because it makes us uncomfortable to watch it happen, because it makes us uncomfortable to have to participate in, steals the learning. And you can see it, right? You can see when we've come through learning that, and to say that resilience, as you talked about bounce, it's not always going to adapt towards the light, right? I think a lot about this
mm,
at the individual level. If I experience trauma, right, I could, if I have access, I can you know, do all of the things that we attribute to good adaptation, right? I can get a therapist and get, prescribed medications to support, and I can do whatever, run a marathon or whatever my thing is to deal with and process my trauma. But if I don't have any of that access, and what I do is use street drugs, it is the same function. It is the same desire to be resilient, actually.
mhm,
One carries social grace and the other one social stigma. One will shorten my life, one pathway will lengthen my life. But why, so I want, right, for every member of the community to have the opportunity it's going to lengthen their life and add value to their life. But both of those instincts are the same. And I think that that's one of the challenges
mm,
is that, we don't always, resilience doesn't always look the way, like look in this positive way. But when we like to call what we like to call resilience is the pathway that we prefer for people or for
mhm.
communities. And so, I just am really conscious of that.
Yeah, versus acknowledging all of the actions that are
Yeah.
meant to be support, right?
Yeah. Meant to be, they're a response.
Response,
They're a
right.
response to what's happening. And so if you want to understand it, you have to understand what's happened
Mhm.
and then work from there. And if we want to change what resilience looks like, we have to create different opportunities.
I wanna come back to something you said a minute ago. You just said a lot of things that I've like 5 different branches I could take, but the first one, I think, is this notion of safe enough to fail spaces. Sometimes safe is tricky for me because we can't necessarily guarantee safety, so brave space, whatever the language is. Um, yeah, what do we mean by that? When you put your leadership hat on, what is safe enough to fail space?
Yeah, so it's an exploration, right? I usually talk about things as good enough to try, safe enough to fail. Lots of things are good enough to try. Almost anything is good enough to try. Safe enough to fail is a different metric, and it requires some grappling. And part of figuring out and so really, it's really in the exploration of what is asking the question, what's safe enough to fail in this context?
Mm,
Right? And what you're trying to do is you're trying to limit the unintentional harm. So, for
that's
example, go ahead.
Yep, sorry. No, I just am like exclamation point on this.
Yeah.
I have so much to say. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I like sometimes the analogy I use, like you can swing your arms in a field. You can't swing your arms in an elevator. So how do you know when you're in the elevator or in the field, right? And so, when other with other people, and so part of that is like, how much proximity do I have to creating harm, unintentional harm for other people? Is it just me? You
Mhm.
know, and so I think those are all of the sort of indices, right? That you have to think through, and then once you've thought them through enough, then you can sort of try whatever risky thing you want to do.
I think this is so important, Leah, because I feel like often when in culture we're talking about risk taking and failing, the narrative that's more associated with risk and failure tends to come out of that sort of industry, fail faster, go hard, um,
Yeah.
language and frame. And then we take it to community, we take it to organizations. And I hear, fail faster. And I'm like, eh, there's some nuance in here that matters,
Mhm.
right? When failure borders recklessness that has impacts on trust
Mhm.
that take a long time to rebuild. I love the way that you describe the nuance,
Mm.
right? The and of it. It's not do we take risk or not? It's what does safe enough to fail look like in this context really brings it into situational awareness. And I think about risk taking in community, for example, or again, organizations. What is the foundation on which risk needs to stand? Right? Because I don't think we're taking risks that's related to our values, for example, right? What are we taking risk on and what are we not?
Mm.
This sort of sturdiness. Because I don't think risk is, kind of fireworks all over the place. To me, there's a sturdiness that we're not talking about, from which then experimentation can grow. And without it, feels dangerous. I mean, you're talking about
Yeah.
like some things you can do in some situations and not in others. So that practice, just asking that question, because yeah, again, I think there's a lot of opportunity for and in this space for risk. And we all individually manage it differently. Certainly collectively we do. And so I think to have a set of tools like you're talking about that help us understand, have a conversation around what is safe enough to fail look like here. Um, this
Yeah.
feels like a really helpful tool for people.
Thank you. Yeah, and part of that is coming up with the benchmarking and the how do we know, right? How do we know?
Exactly.
And so, you know, I think a lot about consent. I worked with a group called Circle Forward. They're really wonderful, and they did consent-based governance. And it was wonderful to take consent, this kind of concept that we tend to um, compartmentalize to an intimate space
Or an individual. Yeah, for sure.
or an individual space into uh, governance, into the way that we interact with other people. And part of the practice is to think about a range of tolerance. And when you're in your range of tolerance, and so much of that is actually that happens at the like feeling level,
Yep.
right? And so what I would do working with people, I still do, and I still think about it for myself, is when you're feeling a kind of way. This is very Southern,
Feel some kind of way about it for sure.
and
I lately am just like, does that make you itchy? What about this is making you itchy? But yeah, all these sort of words that we try to use
yeah.
to talk about the somatic and a felt experience.
Totally, and it's like what that is an invitation to interrogate,
Mm.
right?
Mhm.
And if you step over the invitation to interrogate, you miss this really critical part of consent, and you also miss wisdom because those things feel very connected to me, right? Our somatic experience, consent, and wisdom,
Mm.
because they're all happening at the felt level, and where that interacts with our cognitive. It's like our bodies are a bit ahead of our brains.
Mhm.
And so if we slow down, then we can really lean into what our brain has to tell us, right? So
Amen. I mean, this is why we have made pause buttons,
that's right.
right? This slowing down so that we can let all the things catch up. Let's get let's give us can we kind of
Yeah.
paint a specific
Yeah.
picture about this just to help kind of root
Mhm.
it in pragmatism for
Sure.
folks? So, let's say we're working together and we're in an organization and we want to try something new that feels really risky.
Mhm.
So, are you suggesting that, we're having a group conversation and we're just kind of talking about what are people's like what's the range of tolerance that you have for this or what does that look like from a process perspective and in particular than this sort of we're going to sit with the I'm feeling a way about it.
Yeah. So the way that I would do this is whoever's going to be, the implementers really matter. Like who's going to be carrying forward, they matter. And they have to be the crafters of the good enough to try proposal, right? So they craft this good enough to try proposal, work hard on it, bring their best thinking to it, right? And then the idea is they need to then bring it to that larger group because what you're trying to do is test for risk in that safe enough to fail place with a larger sense. And so I think about like an octopus, right? An octopus has that
Mm-hmm.
like, it's got a thing that looks like a head, but really all of the tentacles are equally as smart and they're feeling out into very different places. And so I think, okay, well, that's where if I'm receiving that proposal, my job is to let it
Land. Yeah.
land and figure out what's risk I'm sensing into. And what I want, if I'm delivering that proposal, Mike, tear it up. Tell
Right.
me how it fails because I need to know. That's what I want to know. I didn't come here for you to tell me it was good. I brought it to you because I believe it's good.
Mm.
So I want you to tell me how it fails. And in that, you can make, I think, the best far-sighted decisions. It's never going to be perfect. But because you are saying, well, how, one of my questions always as an evaluator, if somebody cares very much about that, I'd be like, well, how are you going to test to make sure that it's safe enough to fail in an ongoing way? How are you going to adapt based on what you learn? And once it has those component pieces, and if I can help create some of those component pieces as somebody who has that skill set, then, you know, that's going to be a better thing going forward.
Yeah. I love the idea of a pitch.
Yeah.
Because risk occupies so many different categories: financial risk, legal risk, reputational, relational,
Mm.
and different pieces of the organization are going to see those differently. Another piece of that feels important to me is the frame of the pitch maker that seems in that example not tied to what's being presented. And I think sometimes whatever we're sharing feels so precious to us
Mhm.
that it is hard for people to give that feedback. And so part of the creating that safe space to fail, even in the pitch phase,
Mhm.
is creating that culture where it's like, oh, I'm bringing you the best that I can come up with. And it is expected that your part is to question it.
Mhm.
So just permission to question
Mhm.
is an important kind of cultural element, it feels like, to that. The more you describe this, Leah, I mean, the more, again, to me, when I hear people talking about we need to take more risk, it sounds so quick.
Mhm.
It sounds like it's just it feels more like the
Mhm.
just do it stuff.
Yeah.
And that's where I think we start to get scared of risk as we've had those maybe experiences. This feels so intentional. Just love the and of really thoughtful, embodied, meaningful risk
Yeah.
taking.
Yep. So I'm gonna offer something here though. This is the challenge of being at an age where I'm a mama bird
Eventually
because
you're like, we're done talking about it. Go do it.
no, but partly it's that I'm often confronted with people who are new to implementation, they're new to risk, they're new to all the things. And I do, and part of the role of being mama bird is to kick them out of the nest.
Like,
And
just go do it.
not go do it, but be in a situation where I'm watching them flail
Yes.
in a pitch, in a proposal where they're getting a lot of heat, where they're getting a lot of feedback, where they're getting a lot of risk, and it is uncomfortable.
Yep.
And you cannot steal the learning.
And I'm like transported back to those moments of heat that feels like flailing and feels like failing. And what you're saying is flailing is not failing. Flailing is learning. And so that's what you're like, don't rescue the flail.
Yeah.
I don't know how this lane, I'm like, I hope we're
Mm.
articulate enough for
Yeah.
this to come across. Yeah, it's like nurture a fail
Yeah.
and a flail differently, right? Because it's not necessary. We might still fail, but that's a different thing than flailing,
Yeah.
which in our context, I think what we're saying in a practical sense is that the flailing is the discomfort. It's the questioning. It's the figuring it out. A metaphor came up for me a second ago. Again, this turns the biologists out there are going to have a lot to say for us, I'm sure, about this. The story that I understand it to be, whether it's true or not, y'all can find out, is when a butterfly is emerging, it looks very flaily, right? It's like kind of look like they're stuck. And if the temptation might be, let me help you get out. And if you pull them out, they will not survive because the flail in their case is actually helping them strengthen, whether it's pump blood through their wings or whatever is actually happening. But that emergence is a critical part of the process.
Same thing with chicks that emerge from an egg. If you watch a chick emerging from an egg, it
looks like it's struggling.
Right. You want to, can I crack it open for you? No, you have to let it do it themselves. And I think that's part of it. I think we so often want, you don't want to put somebody in a position when they're not ready. I'm not kicking somebody out of the nest when I don't think they're strong enough to fly.
This is a really tricky, discernment is such an important thing to all things and that we've not actually put a fine point on until this episode. But go ahead. I want you to say more about this because it is a really discerning leadership moment to figure out, like, there's a lot of range in there.
Right. And so that's part of, as a leader, it's part of saying, like, what are the trial balloons to get you to this place? Right. We don't, yes. I mean,
I'm not going to put you on the national news to give your first ever presentation.
Exactly. And I'm not going to, and we're going to do a lot of this pitching early with me. Right. And I'm going to be tough with you and I'm not going to steal the learn. But when you're ready, you should have the full experience of it. And I do see a lot of leaders wanting to step in because they see the heat rising and they see it getting uncomfortable. And I actually think that the experience, because I can go back to, but the experience of the people that mentored me, who let me flail, I never walked away from that being mad at them. I might have been frustrated with myself. I could have done better or whatever, but I knew that they respected me enough to let me own it or lose it. So I'll tell you, so I had a direct report and she was really struggling with a proposal and she had talked to a national consultant that will not be named, but this is like somebody that if I named, you'd be like, whoa, right? And they didn't like what she was planning on doing. And so she called me and she said, well, I got all this feedback. And I said, well, I said, you're feeling a kind of way about that feedback. And I said, here's the thing. If you do it the way that somebody told you to do it, but it didn't feel right to you.
Yeah.
If you fail, it's not yours. And if you succeed, it's not yours. But if you do it the way that it feels right to you, if you fail, it's yours. And if you succeed, it's yours. Right? So I think you should think about that.
Well, yeah. And that's, I think what I was saying about the value side of it for me is I know why I'm doing what I'm doing, even if it doesn't work out.
Yeah.
And I can stand in that.
Yep.
Because I think you have to have an anchor.
Yeah.
You have to have an anchor. So let me think about that for a second. So there's the anchor in yourself. And then so much of what you're talking about now too is, I don't know if I'd call it an anchor, but the role of mentor, use the word mentor, I guess here, in this sort of, I believe in you, it is a powerful place because it does feel like as mentor, you're going to keep that safe distance. And if it goes real sudden, it's a little bit of a safety net at some level. So it's holding discomfort, just to come back to discomfort in the flailing and the struggle and the trying. Again, we're not saying there's a lot of nuance here. So just like we're not all in, just take the risk, just do it. We're not saying all in, just go struggle.
Yeah.
I hear you saying it's a gradual build. I often think about that as building courage calluses. It's this sort of time builds. And then at a certain point, you're ready. And there's the discomfort of the person, let's say, giving the talk, and the discomfort of the mentor that we're holding the energy of. I think in a lot of this, space, our ability to hold and honor and manage and negotiate our energy is a huge piece of all of it.
It is, and you don't get that, right? You get that from it's your courage calluses. I love
Yeah.
that. It is. Like, I'm, I was thinking a lot about, where for my like, where did I have my big grow moments? And, a lot of it actually happened at the place where I was doing activities that took my physical body to the end of my stamina, right? Like,
Mm.
running distance or biking for long periods of time. Partly because what would show up when I was physically exhausted is exactly what shows up for me when I'm mentally exhausted.
Huh, which is what?
Self-hatred.
Yeah, yeah.
You're not good enough, all
Right.
the things,
The rude
right?
critic, yeah.
Yeah, totally comes up. It's, you can't do all that. And when I would get to that place, but there was no one to blame, because one of the things that happens when you're in that place is you're like, where you want to imprint on the blame.
You just
Who's
wanna get it
making me
out.
feel this way?
Right.
Right? Who's making me feel this way? And in that space, I was like, no, no, this is just what happens. This is just where I go
Right.
when I'm at this place of just total exhaustion, flailing, whatever. And once I could see it in this, that was a safe enough to have those emotional spaces. And I would be, out, and and especially for distance running or whatever, I'd be out and I'd be like, well, as far as I go out is as far as I got to come back. And that's just what it is. And I can walk back, I can cry back, I can crawl back, I can sit right here and never not get up again. But this is what it is. And then I started being kind to myself because I could see it for what it
See,
was.
that's
And
what I'm saying, like the compassion from the ground.
that's right. Yeah. Just like, oh, yeah, this really sucks. And so it was funny because when I was running, somebody's like, how much does just teach running? What's the difference between stamina and endurance? And of course, the linguists out there can say you're wrong, but this is what I came to without Google. Because
In my own clarity.
I don't like, I refuse to Google. That's
Oh,
my
good
thing.
for you.
I'm like, nope, I'm just gonna make it up. And
Right.
if it's wrong, somebody will correct me.
So y'all Google on her behalf
That's right.
before you take any of this in.
For me, stamina was getting to the end of my physical ability, and endurance was going beyond. When you know your body can't do it, but you're all will, and I'm like, one more step, get to that next thing, and I'm doing that thing where it's the small goal, and get to the next thing, get to the next thing, get to the next thing, and and that to me is life.
Yeah, and I wrote down as you were describing that, right, you're talking about practicing discomfort. And I wrote down low risk failure because I think too, I don't know that I've ever thought about it, but I'm somebody, I think you're this way. You on purpose do new scary stuff. Is this true?
Oh,
Yeah,
absolutely, every
same.
year.
And so that feels a little head scratchy to people. But I'm like, it's how I practice because doing that, right? So learning to blacksmith, for example, is going to bring up all of your stuff. It's going to push, it's going to show me how frustrated of a person I am. It's going to show me how not patient of a person. And the risk is so low, like failing in that context, like, so what?
Right.
But it's practice because what you just so much, it feels like is important about this is you're like, oh, I know that I feel this way when this happens. And so when I feel that way, like you're practicing feeling the thing
Hmm.
when the stakes are not as high. So that it's not, I'm going to go get uncomfortable for the first time ever at this really high stakes thing. It's like you know your body processes. So it's an interesting tool, I think,
Hmm.
to say what's something little I can do that puts me outside of my comfort zone that lets me feel a little flaily.
Yeah.
Let me try to paint, and I never have
Yep. And how you treat yourself in those moments, and we're all doing it all the time,
all the time.
right? You tried to cook something,
Oh,
and it didn't go where yeah, you decide, right? I like the famous, like, safe enough to fail moment is when you're like, "I'm gonna cook an entirely new thing for new people."
this is such a funny example. Literally right now. Okay, so anybody who knows me is gonna be like, "This is perfect." I have a little dry erase board in the kitchen, of course. that lays out, here's what's happening for dinner this week
Yeah.
and who's in charge of it. It used to be specific, and now
Yeah.
it's just like whatever capable person that lives in this house is in charge. The first 2 bullets on the thing just say, "Mom, experiment number 1, Mom, experiment number 2." Because as much as I take risks, I am very lazy. I don't like to cook because I can't handle the disappointment of it. I like good food. So I'm like, this is ridiculous because this is such good practice. We are not food insecure. We have a lot of privilege. We're going to eat.
Mm-hmm.
So a terrible dinner is not going to ruin anything. Why can I not try this? So the past 2 nights, we've had something different. I don't know that we'll have them again, but that I labeled it experiment
Yeah.
is interesting to me in the context of this conversation, because even when we use that word, there is an expectation, right? It's what science is. It is the test that nobody expects to always be correct. I'm doing a lot in creativity right now and trying to bring over this notion of experimentation. I don't know where we lose it,
Mm-hmm.
but it's such a part. It makes all this make sense. Like, oh, of course, we're going to try stuff. Not all of it's going to work. What's the safe, right? Then what's the container? So maybe that's what we lost. Is like we know intuitively, we learn to walk through experimentation. It's that maybe we haven't been able to figure out collectively that safe space container to support it, right? Because, and you see it, like why it took 7 years maybe to do the podcast is like, what's the internet going to have to say about today's failure?
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I don't know what the sort of collective thing we could do to honor the experimentation of it and hold that with grace. And though, this intentionality that you talked about that I think may be missing too.
I think that's the crux of it, and I think part of it is, and I think a really essential part of the safe enough to fail is that your value as a person is not dependent on what you produce.
Period. Hold. We need to breathe that in. Say it again.
Your value as a person is not dependent on what you produce. And so succeed or fail. And, I told you that story about my colleague, the person that I was a supervisor to. I said to her, you succeed in this and you fail in this, I got you. And I believe in you.
Yeah.
And so it's completely okay. What you choose is what you choose. And right now in this moment, I want you to make a choice that feels right for you. And you can do what the consultant told you to do, make those changes. That's your choice, right? All the
Yeah.
choice
But
piece.
that's the huge part though, is I've got you.
Yeah.
Whatever you decide, that's part of I'm gonna let you hold this.
Yeah.
And whatever happens, I've got you. I think that's probably one of the pieces that we don't say enough. Yeah. Even just thinking about delegation, sometimes this comes up of like, fine, you do it.
Yeah.
Sometimes feels very detached.
Yeah. And don't.
Instead of like, right, it's like, go do it and don't F this up.
That's right.
This is very different.
No.
This is like, again, not just blindly like go do it, but with all the supports and all the other things that you talked about along the way. But this sort of, I've got you,
Yeah. And
feels
it's
like an important piece of it.
And like, yeah, because if you've done it enough, like you are going to have time where the world just hands you your rear end and
It's
you
the
just have to
worst.
hold it and be like, oh gosh. Right. And I think that part of that is just and that is actually just all part of it. And so if you're on the edge, if you're doing things that are big enough and you talked about that doing stuff, my kids have seen this. I started when I was like 18 years old and I was a person who had a lot of perfectionism and I had a lot of anxiety.
Same.
And I just was terrified of everything. I'm just
Same.
tiny. I think I weighed like 98 pounds, right? I'm soaking wet, just tiny. Very, you can't see me, people in the world, but I'm 4'11", so just I was this tiny person and terrified. And I don't know why, but I just decided that I was going to do things that made me afraid. Because I just was like, I got to a point where I was like, I just don't want to be a person who's afraid. Like that's going to stop everything in my whole life.
I feel this deeply. Yeah.
And so the first thing I did was I thought, what's the most terrifying thing I can imagine? And it was to be in community theater.
Super.
So I was like, oh, I'm going to go to this tryout for this community theater thing. I'm also a perfectionist, so I really knocked it out of the
Of
park
course.
and got the lead role. And I'm a serious introvert, and I have to now go and perform, but of course have incredible stage fright that when you saw me doing that audition, because I was so amped, no one would have ever imagined, right? Like,
Right.
I came in there like I had had a stage mom my
Yeah.
whole life.
Like tanked up on espresso shots.
Exactly. And so then and I was terrible, and I had to
Oh,
play
in the actual
in
show?
the actual show.
So
I was
bad.
terrible because I had stage fright every night, and stage fright is not one of those things that you can just, like, magic your way out of.
No, it's kind of
There
feeds itself.
it really does, and I just parched. I couldn't
Because once you're terrible, then you're actively seeing yourself be terrible.
see people looking at
People
you.
can see you're terrible. The feedback loop is rough on that.
You're just standing there forgetting your lines in the middle of a monologue, and they're looking at you, and you're just like, "Oh, this
Oh,
isn't going well." The director is crying, I mean, not really, but really.
it feels that way.
It was just totally it was terrible. And, my friends came to see me, and they were like,
Yeah.
but I had to do it. I had to finish it because I made the commitment. It got a little bit better by the end, but not much. Yeah, so I kinda that was right out of the gate, but I didn't stop, doing things that made me scared. People loved me. People who loved me,
Hmm.
and we laughed about it, and it's still, like, I still brings me a lot of joy to remember how bad I was at it.
Oh, my family still likes to talk about my one basketball team experience. We don't need to dig into any deeper than that. That was not actually because I was scared. That just was a failure demonstration. It's interesting to hear you talk about this because it's in particular thinking about creativity. I'm taking a class right now where we have to do some reflection and thinking about creative things that I've been part of. And there's a theme in there, like, why do you do them? And some, like half was like, because it felt scary.
Mhm.
I think for me, we do a whole nother podcast about fear, but my professional path, like day one, I was an AmeriCorps volunteer kind of out of college, and day two was September 11th,
Mhm.
2001. And something about that time for me, like scared in a new way, I buried deep in myself, fear cannot win.
Mm.
And still, I'm often having to remind myself because I too, like you, I'm a recovering perfectionist. I'm wired with anxious energy on the inside. So this fear cannot win has me constantly turning toward fear,
Mhm.
where so often on the other side is freedom of some sort, even if just from the fear. Because once you're on the other side, you have a different story to tell fear, right? Because fear, you said that voice in your head is like, you can't do that. What do you think? And you're like, well, I just did it. And my friends are still my friends. So it's part of the courage callus building. It's how we rewrite the stories that we tell ourselves. Again, I think part of I don't know that your birds in the metaphor from the beginning are thinking that hard about it, but when you're at choice, there's a lot of cognitive cycling that gets processed around this stuff. And I think it can. And part of it is like, I also have to be careful to be like, you don't have to do scary stuff all the time. Like, we
No.
can also, from blacksmithing, like, there's a lot of heat and hammering and there's quenching.
Mhm.
Like, there's some and in
Absolutely.
how do I hold that it does require a lot of energy for me to do these things.
Mhm.
And what is that sort of recovery intending? Is there anything else, Leah, that's sitting with you that you want to say to folks who are thinking about all the concepts that we've stirred up today, how it might apply to them? Tools or lessons, even that you have from being on this journey that we want to leave with folks before we tie it up?
Yeah, so I wanna go back to being reflecty. I think that, I think the "and" of all of this, as you're saying, probably more eloquent than I'm gonna say right now, is that, some of these things can be subtractive, right? Not everything's additive, and not everything has to be. And sometimes it's just, it just
Sucks.
sucks.
Yeah.
And that's okay. And I think being able to be in your own discomfort is critical, and giving yourself the healing time
Yep.
in between. Um, and that, yeah, and then, yeah, I think that we are all enough just as we are in this moment is so
Mm.
critical. Um, and so yeah, absolutely loved having this conversation with you. Super fun.
So fun, and time evaporates when
It
we
does.
start with our nerdy generalizing.
I know. I didn't even get to bring up imaginal cells. I mean, come on.
Y'all, imaginal. I used the word imaginal the other day, and somebody was like, "What do you mean?" We'll
Next
talk about
time.
that another day. I do, just to tag on what you said, the normalizing of this, I think, is really powerful too. Because when you are the one sweating, it can feel very isolating.
Yeah.
And it can feel like, I think that's why I'm obsessed with talking about all of
Mhm.
this, and the stuckness is like, me too, y'all.
Yeah.
Leah too, y'all.
Oh, yeah.
Because you see, oh, and now they're doing this and now they're doing
Yeah.
this. So I can't do that because I get sweaty or I am nervous. I'm like, absolutely, we all are nervous. So normalizing some of the felt sense of all of this feels really important. And then so much to me, I'm taking away today from what you said is just how do we support each other in the flail?
Yeah.
Because it doesn't have to be. I mean, you talked a lot about leadership and mentorship. So there's a lot of call to leaders, I think, around this is a curiosity around container building. What are the ways that we're creating the space for people? How do we support folks? And then just an exclamation point on
Yeah.
we're already enough. Because
Yeah.
I think it's it's a whole nother space that we get in
Yeah.
when the failure um I think it's the difference in shame and guilt and all that stuff. It's like, I am not a failure. This thing failed
Exactly.
is a very important
Yeah.
distinction.
It's like that. And also just like if you're flailing in your life and you don't actually find joy, that may not be the place for you to flail.
Interesting.
So if you go towards the joy of it, you're going to have a whole lot more stamina and endurance to the flail. And I think that that's a critical
Mm,
piece. So you got to go where your joy is. And because I have definitely been like flailing around, but laughing with friends
right.
and connecting and finding all the things that I needed to continue to do that. Anyone who's really just like you see them and they've got some mastery, they'll tell a story about their flail. But they kept coming back to it.
Mm.
And so it's not just about being in spaces where you're just flailing and you're not feeling it. Like if you don't
Mm,
find that joy, go find someplace else to flail. You'll find it.
interesting. I feel like I had a light bulb there about go towards joy. On teams before, we've talked about things being the right kind of hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so there's some interesting discernment in like, oh, this feels hard. To me, I keep coming back to values. It feels hard and
And
it's the right kind of hard because it's in service to my values. Because when I'm done, I actually am loving it by the time the podcast is over, even if I'm sweating in the beginning.
that's right.
It is different. So I think that's a really important because just a blanket, you know, endorsement of discomfort
Mhm.
is not the
Mm-mm.
answer. Because so much of what you and I are trying to do in our work is remove unnecessary discomfort. So that's a helpful reminder to just be part of your noticing
Mhm.
around the whispers or elements in small ways or big around how the flailing and the joy show up
Yeah.
together. This has been a very joyful conversation. I appreciate it. I appreciate everybody being along for the ride, especially for all the biologists out there who hung in with us. Feel free to send your feedback and corrections to connect at standintheand.com. Uh, Curious what y'all are doing with these podcasts. Are they conversation prompts for teams? Are you sharing them? I hope you are if they're helpful. Follow us. I keep getting feedback that I'm not saying the right words about what you actually do. Subscribe to a podcast. so that you get them as soon as they're posted. We know we're on a cadence that's not routine, so thanks for hanging there with us on that. But all the other info, Leah, I think you mentioned a couple of frameworks. So we'll link to those in the show notes in case people have more curiosity there about those. Otherwise, appreciate y'all being here. Thank you for being here. Y'all stay curious. We're right there with you. And keep building courage, calluses. It matters. Thanks. Bye. The Stand in the And podcast is supported by Human-Centered Strategy, where we help leaders and teams build connection and strategy and complexity so that everyone can flourish. To learn more or to work with us, please visit us online at humancenteredstrategy.com or message me on LinkedIn.